The Dashti Kavir Desert stretches across Iran like a wound that will not heal. Salt flats crack into geometric patterns that seem almost mathematical, as if the earth itself is trying to communicate in a language no one has yet decoded. The heat shimmers above it in waves that distort vision, creating mirages of cities that do not exist, lakes that have been dry for millennia. It is a place of silence so profound that travelers have reported hearing their own blood move through their veins. It was here, in a facility that does not appear on any map, that the weapon was born. The Iranians called it Sedaye Zamin, it's the voice of the earth, and when it was finally tested, the silence it broke would never truly be restored. Dr. Reza Khorasani had spent 20 years studying the physics of sound. His specialty was infrasonic waves, frequencies below the range of human hearing. The deep rumbles that travel through the earth itself, the whispers of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, the songs of whales that cross entire oceans. He was a gentle man, with hands that trembled slightly and eyes that held the distant look of someone who spends too much time listening to things no one else can hear. In 2018, he was summoned to a meeting in Tehran. The men who met him wore uniforms without insignia and spoke in sentences that circled their meaning like wolves circling prey. They asked him questions about his research, detailed questions, technical questions, questions that suggested they already knew the answers. They wanted to know if sound could be weaponized, if infrasonic waves could be focused, amplified, directed at specific targets, if the very fabric of the earth could be made to sing in frequencies that would shatter not walls, but minds. Dr. Khorasani told them the truth. In theory, yes. Infrasound at certain frequencies could resonate with human organs, the heart, the lungs, the brain. It could cause disorientation, terror, organ failure, death. It could travel through solid rock, through reinforced concrete, through the deepest bunkers. It could be felt, but not heard, experienced, but not detected. It would be, he said, the perfect weapon for a war that might never be seen. The men nodded. They thanked him. And then they told him that he would be moving to a new laboratory, in a location they could not disclose, to work on a project they could not name, for a purpose they could not explain. His family would be told he was on extended research leave. His colleagues would assume he had taken a position abroad, who had ceased to exist in the world of ordinary men. He never saw his wife again. The facility was a miracle of engineering and secrecy. It had been carved into the heart of a mountain on the edge of the Dashti Kavir, its entrance hidden in a canyon that appeared on no satellite imagery. The Iranians had learned from decades of watching their enemies, from the Israeli airstrikes that had destroyed their nuclear ambitions, from the Stuxnet virus that had crippled their centrifuges, from the assassinations that had claimed their scientists one by one. They built deep, and they built silent, and they built where no one thought to look. Dr. Khorasani was given a laboratory 200 meters below the surface, in a complex that hummed with the constant vibration of generators and life support systems. He worked alongside physicists, engineers, and military strategists who spoke in the clipped, precise language of men who have seen too much to be surprised by anything. They called the project Project Simerj, after the mythical bird of Persian legend that could carry the righteous to safety and the wicked to destruction. For 3 years, Dr. Khorasani and his team refined the technology. They built emitters that could generate infrasonic waves with unprecedented precision. They developed algorithms that could target specific frequencies to specific individuals, reading their biological signatures from kilometers away. They created a system that could be deployed from drones, from satellites, from hidden bunkers buried in the desert floor. The first human test was conducted on a volunteer, a prisoner from Evan, a man who had been sentenced to death for crimes the state would not specify. He was placed in a sealed chamber a kilometer from the emitter. Dr. Khorasani watched through a monitor as the man sat on a metal chair, his hands cuffed behind his back, his face a mask of fear and confusion. The technician pressed a button. The emitter hummed, a sound too low to hear but so deep it could be felt in the teeth. On the monitor, the prisoner's expression changed. His eyes widened. His mouth opened in a scream that no microphone could capture. He began to shake, his body convulsing as if seized by a grand mal seizure. After 47 seconds, his heart stopped. Dr. Khorasani turned away from the screen. The military men in the room were smiling. They called it a success. He called it murder. But he did not say it aloud, because he knew that in this place, words could be as deadly as any weapon. By 2022, Project Simurgh had produced something that the Iranian military believed could change the balance of power. In the Middle East, they called it the Seti-Zaman, the voice of the earth. It was not a bomb or a missile, but a system. A network of emitters buried in the desert, linked to satellites and drones, capable of targeting individuals or entire populations with waves of sound that could induce terror, madness, or death. The weapon had 3 modes. The first was TARS, fear. At a specific frequency, the infrasound would resonate with the human amygdala, the brain's fear center. Targets would experience overwhelming, inexplicable dread. Soldiers would abandon their posts. Pilots would crash their planes. Commanders would give irrational orders. It was a weapon of psychological warfare that left no physical trace. The second was Sargadani, disorientation. A different frequency would disrupt the vestibular system, the body's sense of balance. Targets would become dizzy, nauseous, unable to walk or stand. They would lose all sense of direction, wandering in circles until they collapsed from exhaustion. It was a weapon that could neutralize an entire battalion without firing a shot. The third was Marg death. The final frequency resonated with the human heart, causing it to beat faster and faster until it simply stopped. It was precise, silent, and utterly invisible. A man could be walking down the street, talking to his family, living his life, and then, in an instant, he would fall. Autopsy would show cardiac arrest. No one would ever know. The military men were ecstatic. They had built the perfect weapon, undetectable, untraceable, unstoppable. They imagined scenarios where Israeli generals dropped dead in their command centers, where American aircraft carriers were rendered useless by crews too terrified to function, where the balance of power in the region shifted overnight. Dr. Corazoni listened to their plans and felt a coldness settle in his chest that no desert heat could warm. The opportunity to test the weapon in real-world conditions came sooner than anyone expected. In the spring of 2023, a series of mysterious incidents began to plague Israeli military installations along the northern border. Soldiers reported overwhelming feelings of dread, of being watched, of an impending doom they could not explain. Several had to be evacuated after collapsing with symptoms that doctors could not diagnose. A pilot crashed his F-16 during a routine training flight. His last words a garbled scream about the voice in the earth. Israeli intelligence was baffled. There were no signs of conventional attack, no electronic warfare signatures they could detect. The incidents were dismissed as mass hysteria, as the result of stress and prolonged deployment. But the officers who investigated knew better. Something was happening, something they could not explain. The Iranians watched the reports with satisfaction. The Sudais-Zamin worked. It worked better than they had hoped. They began to plan larger operations against military bases, against command centers, against the Knesset itself. Dr. Khorasani watched the news reports from his underground laboratory. He saw the faces of the soldiers, young men with whole lives ahead of them, their eyes hollow with the fear he had helped create. He saw the families of the pilot weeping at a funeral for a man who had died screaming at a sound no one else could hear. He saw the beginning of a war that would be fought in silence, in shadows, in the deepest, most primitive parts of the human brain. And he knew that he could not stay silent any longer. In the summer of 2023, Dr. Khorasani made contact with a foreign intelligence agency. The details of that contact remain classified, but what is known is that he provided them with the technical specifications of the Seti-Zamin, the frequencies, the targeting algorithms, the locations of the buried emitters. He did it not out of loyalty to any country, but out of a desperate hope that if both sides knew the weapon existed, neither would dare to use it. The Iranians discovered the betrayal within days. Dr. Khorasani was arrested in his laboratory, his hands still trembling as they always had, his eyes still holding that distant look of a man who hears things no one else can. He was taken to a detention facility in Tehran, where he was interrogated for weeks. They wanted to know who he had talked to, what he had given them, how much they knew. He told them everything. He had no secrets left. The only thing he asked over and over was whether his wife knew what had happened to him. They never answered. On the 17th day of his interrogation, Dr. Khorasani was found dead in his cell. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. His heart, the doctor said, had simply stopped. There was no sign of violence, no evidence of foul play. He had died, they said, of natural causes. Those who knew the truth understood what had really happened. The Sides Amin had claimed its last victim, its own creator. Somewhere in the desert, a machine had hummed at a frequency no one could hear, and a man had fallen silent forever. In early 2024, whispers of the weapon began to surface in international media. A Iranian general, Ibrahim Rostami, made a cryptic statement that was reported around the world. "We have equipment far superior to nuclear weapons," he said. "Information about this weapon is completely secret." He hinted that it had been used in past operations, that enemies had been struck without ever knowing where the blow came from. The world speculated. Some thought it was a bluff, a propaganda exercise designed to intimidate Iran's enemies. Others believed it was real, a weapon so terrible that even the threat of its existence could shift the geopolitical landscape. Intelligence agencies scrambled to verify the claims, to understand what Iran had built, to find a way to defend against it. The truth was stranger than anyone imagined. A weapon that killed with silence, a weapon that left no trace, a weapon that could strike anywhere, at any time, and no one would ever know until the bodies began to fall. Dr. Reza Khorazoni is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the desert he loved. His name does not appear in any official records of the Iranian military program. His family does not know what happened to him. His work continues without him, refined and improved by the men who took his research and turned it into something he never intended. The Sides Amin still waits in its underground bunkers, its emitters pointed toward horizons that have not yet been crossed. On quiet nights, when the wind blows across the salt flats, it carries with it a sound too low to hear, the whisper of a weapon that has not yet spoken its final word. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, the voice of the earth still calls.